Business Requirements Validation Technique. This is what you will learn in this course. What the difference is between a need and a requirement. Not all business requirements are really required. How to gather business requirements strictly in the scope of the project objectives. How to validate if an existing business requirement is actually needed. What business requirements are. People working on projects in business and IT are familiar with the concept of business requirements. Business requirements exist more broadly than IT developers used to understand them. This creates a confusion in what is what, which we will resolve in this lecture, but we have to start with defining what business requirements are. Business requirements are what must be delivered to provide value to the business requesters. These values are in business functionality, while products, systems, software and processes are the ways how to deliver the values. This relates to both business and technical projects, though the means of delivering the values are different. Business requirements are about eliciting and documenting requirements of business users such as customers, employees and vendors. Business requirements are often captured by business analysts who analyze business needs and often study as-is process to define a target to be process. Business requirements should include, as minimum, business context and background, including reasons for change, key business stakeholders that have these requirements, success factors for a future target state, glossaries of business terms and local jargon, business semantics and ontology, functional and operational preferences and constraints. Business requirements should not point to the products, systems, software, data flows and data models instead of information flows and models. Including such things into business requirements is the confusion number one. Business services and processes, as well as business products, may be mentioned but only as a context where required values will or should exist when created. Required business values are usually associated with business goals, objectives, or expected benefits. None of them are business requirements, and this is the confusion number two. Parts of business requirements. The term business requirement is a little ambiguous because it is a composition of three parts. 1. Business needs. 2. Expressions of these needs in the form of requirements, which are not always mapped one-to-one. 3. Details of the business context that must be discovered and considered in the solution, but that are not significant for expressing them initially. It is important to note that driving the business requirements down to detail never turns them into a product specification. The letter describes what should be done to satisfy the last detail of requirements, and this is a special professional job, to define the specification. Finally, dividing business requirements into functional and non-functional is already an element of transformation of business requirements into a specification. In original business requirements, all requirements are functional and should be contextual, which sometimes is attributed to a non-functional requirements. Not required business requirement. People who work in projects, especially in technology, frequently forget that business requirements formed from business needs by people, and those people are not without sins as well. In many IT departments, there is a belief that any business requirement coming to them is the unquestionable absolute truth, and nobody may dare to challenge them in any way. If something is missing in the business requirements, technical business and systems analysts must find this missing part. If one requirement contradicts another, this is a tragedy and the case of escalation to the senior IT management. In my practice, a set of business requirements of 100 items was not an exception. This happened to relatively regular projects, In my practice, a set of business requirements of 100 items was not an exception. This happened to relatively regular projects, not for strategic corporate programs that cross between units and divisions. Where do so many requirements come from, and is it realistic to hope that these hundreds would be implemented in the same high quality? The answer to the latter is known already. It is no. Moreover, special development methodology, known as MOSCO, has been created to notify business stakeholders that high-quality implementation of the given business requirements is impossible. The MOSCO is a system of indicators of requirement priorities such as must have, should have, could have, won't have. As you see, the message sent by this method is that not all business requirements will be met, at least in the next release. Usually, this means that they will not be implemented ever. The only unknown element of this method is how these priorities are defined and justified against each business requirement. The answer to a further part of the question is cumbersome. I have two theories. In the first one, so many requirements are the result of meticulous analysis of the business needs conducted in the business by its business analysts. If such analysis takes place, it would be just great. However, it is unlikely that so many requirements would be identified for one business need. If the number of requirements grows at this magnitude, business usually splits the needs into several subtasks, and those subtasks are handed over for an implementation. Numbers of requirements for each task seldom exceed a few dozen. The second theory of mine assumes that business requirements sent to implementation are not analyzed at all. I saw such cases much more frequently than anything else. Here is a typical scenario. A business team needs to improve an automation used in their major process that has many branches and requires several specialists to work with them. The process managers define the objectives and the goal of the business change and ask involved specialists to list their needs regarding this process. Specialists do their best and the aggregated list is passed to IT as business requirements. What is wrong with this scenario? In 99% of cases, aforementioned business requirements contain one mistake that justifies the use of the MOSCO method. This mistake is in a disconnection between the formulated goal and objectives on the one side and the needs of the specialists on the other side. When the business requirements were aggregated, nobody verified if particular specialists' needs related to the objectives defined by the managers. Unfortunately, this is not a joke. On many occasions where internationally distributed teams formed business requirements, I saw repeated requirements coming from different geographies. Now, let me represent two methods that can help filtering business requirements from the waste and justifying the MOSCO priorities. Actually, I am not a fan of MOSCO because this method has a potential to bury business requirements. Yes, I understand that the implementation resources are limited, but what is the purpose of spending time on requirements that will not be implemented? Cause pyramid method for gathering requirements. The cause pyramid method helps to collect business requirements strictly in line with the goal or objectives of the business tasks set for a project. This relates to both business and IT projects. All business requirements have to start by defining what has to be achieved in a project, i.e., with the goal and objectives of the business tasks. This forms the level 1 of the cause pyramid. The project objectives usually reflect the business needs. For simplicity, we assume that there is just one goal or objective defined. Level 2 has to contain an answer to the question, what is needed at a high level that immediately delivers the objective? In other words, Level 2 interprets the statement in Level 1 as a task and has to identify what is needed to deliver the solution for this task. In the next step, Level 3, the method determines what is required to address each statement task specified in Level 2, and so on. The process of defining what is needed for the upper level of tasks has to be continuous. It is known as a process of the business task decomposition. The process stops when no more business tasks can be identified at a lower level and the task implementation has to step onto the scene. When we gather requirements by strictly matching identified tasks driven by the project goal or objective, we can avoid a lot of wishes and desires that do not necessarily fit with the objectives, but are expressed by business stakeholders who try to take an advantage of the project. In business workshops or reviews, when a particular business need is discussed, the only thing to be done is to verify whether this need fits with the major business goal, objectives, and the cause pyramid as the verification instrument. If the fit is not found, a related stakeholder has to be informed that for this need to be considered in the project objectives or goal has to be changed. Such a change is usually a prerogative of higher management, and it does not happen by the way. Challenging requirements by risk assessment method. The risk assessment method also suggests that each of the collected business requirements is challenged against the goal or objectives of a project. However, in this method, the challenge is done after the requirements are collected. The challenge formula is: what might be the risk, harm to achieving the business goals or objectives of the project if a particular requirement is not met or realized? The answers to this challenge may be categorized, for example, into severe, dangerous, minor, or no risk. The map of the requirement risk becomes the foundation for the defining requirement priorities that may be expressed in the form of MOSCO. This method may be performed by a business architect or business analyst, depending on the scope, scale of the business goal or objectives. Surprisingly to many managers and even business analysts, many requirements that the stakeholders considered as must-have appear as no risk or even irrelevant to a project goal. This indicates that such requirements were subjective rather than objective, and spending resources on implementation of these requirements requires further discussion. What you have learned. There is a difference between a business need and a requirement. Not all business requirements are really required. Some of them may be subjective. Business requirements strictly in the scope of the project objectives using cause pyramid method. This method collects answers to the question, what is needed to resolve a particular task? No pointers to how the task should be resolved are permitted in the requirements. Existing or just collected business requirement may be validated using the risk assessment method. This method justifies a priority of requirement in the MOSCO categories. Thank you. Please allow me to thank you for your time and attention. I hope you have found useful information in the course. If you have any related questions, please post them in the related forum on the same website, and I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. Also, you are very welcome to post your opinion and considerations about the course in the same forum. If you have a consulting proposal with regard to this or another course or the blog post, please use Contact Me instant messaging on the same website to contact me directly. Thank you again, and good luck.